Hey everybody, another day, another Ixalan set review. Welcome to the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and today we're going to take a look at every single red card in this set of Ixalan. Of course, the quick disclaimers, if you haven't heard them by now, the most important one is simply that this is a limited set review. I'm not talking about Constructed or EDH or Canadian Highlander or anything like that. I'm talking about Draft, I'm talking about Sealed. But if you need a recap, you should go back and watch the previous day's set reviews, and you should watch them anyways, because just watching a single color doesn't really make sense, now does it? But let's jump on into this review. Up first is Angrath's Marauders. Angrath, of course, being the new Minotaur Planeswalker we were introduced to in the Magic story last week, and who we will presumably see a card for in the next set. Angrath's Marauders is 5 red for a creature human pirate at rare. It's a 4/4. If a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. Almost technically the same as Goring Ceratops, except this doesn't have to attack, and your creatures don't gain a first strike step because they just do double damage. They don't actually get double strike. 7 mana is a little bit pricey, but you don't get this effect for cheap. It's a very solid finisher. Just make sure that you are building your deck towards this. This does not go in an Amonkhet style 1-2-3 drop deck. It goes in a much more longer game deck. Still would prefer to go slightly wide. But yeah, this looks solid. I've got it at a B+. You need to build around it, obviously. You need to get to that 7 mana. But with all the treasures kicking around, it shouldn't be too hard to get there. Just don't assume you're always going to get there. Up next is Bonded Horncrest. Bonded Horncrest, it is 3 and a red for a creature dinosaur at uncommon. It's a 5/5, and Bonded Horncrest can't attack or block alone. Being unable to attack or block without a friend isn't really worth the 1 mana discount on this to me. It's just too much of a downside. It's off just a little bit too much and does stone nothing if you're really behind. It does not get you back into the game. I'll cut this pretty regularly at a C-. Up next is Brazen Buccaneers. Brazen Buccaneers is 3 and a red for a creature human pirate at common. It's a 2/2 with haste, and when Brazen Buccaneers enters the battlefield, it explores. A 2/2 haste for 4 is not something I'm interested in. You know, I'm much more used to a 3/3 haste for 3. We're talking, you know, Brazen Scourge, for example. Make it a 3/3 haste, and I'm still not terribly interested, not for 4 mana. I get a scry out of it, so that's kind of cool. It's maybe just fine at that point. Maybe being a 2/2 haste for 4 that draws a land, I'm just not sold on that. So yet another of these common explorers that I'm just kind of out on at a C-. I'll play them if I'm desperate for a creature, and if I'm not, sorry, you're sitting in the sideboard. Up next is Burning Sun's Avatar. Burning Sun's Avatar is 3 red for a creature dinosaur avatar at rare. It's a 6/6. When Burning Sun's Avatar enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to target opponent and 3 damage to up to 1 target creature. I don't like that triple red, but it's a 6/6 for 6 with a pair of lightning bolts attached to it. I'll learn to deal with it. This is just a straight up bomb. It'll massively turn the tides of a game. It'll get you right back into a game really handily. Compare this to Bonded Horncrest. This gets you right back into the game. Bonded Horncrest does not. A snap first pick. You just need to make sure that you're a little bit heavily leaning towards red to make sure that you're going to hit that triple red. But as long as you are, this is just going to be a beating. Solid A. Captain Lannery Storm is up next. Captain Lannery Storm is 2 and a red for a legendary creature human pirate at rare. It's a 2/2 haste. Whenever Captain Lannery Storm attacks, create a colorless treasure artifact token. Whenever you sack a treasure, Captain Lannery Storm gets +1/+0 until end of turn. A 2/2 haste for 3 that pops out treasures is solid. I'm sold right there. This is a repeatable form of treasures for those things that do care about treasures, most notably Revel in Riches. Then getting Fire Breathing for popping a treasure is just a nice little bonus, plus that mana that you're presumably using for something. This isn't a game-breaking bomb, but it's just a really good sort of B+ level utility creature. Captivating Cruise is up next. Captivating Crew is 3 and a red for a creature human pirate at rare. It's a 4/3. 3 and a red, gain control of target creature and opponent controls until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. Activate this ability only any time that you could cast a sorcery. This seems pretty solid and is a nice enough mana sink yet again, though mana sinks are preferably instant speed because you'd like to hold that mana up, pretend you may, maybe you're not pretending, maybe you are going to counter something or removal, and then when you don't have to, then you get to use your mana sink. So being sorcery speed is a little bit a little bit less good. Basically, you've got a 4/3 for 4 that draws you infinite 4-mana threat and effects. That will win games. It won't pull you back from a losing game terribly well since it is sorcery speed. This is only being used for attacking. So I'm not sure I'm at a total instant first pick bomb status on this card, but the power is absolutely there, so I will start it at a B+. Just don't get too best case scenario mentality with this. I've seen people saying this is the single best card in the set for limited, and that is wrong. B+. Up next is one of the thankfully rarely busted cards in the set. Charging Monstrosaur is 4 and a red for a creature dinosaur at uncommon, and it's a 5/5. It's a 5/5 for 5. It's giant claw speed. Oh, it also has trample. Oh, it also has haste. This is going to be a grown test card. This is going to be a card where you're playing a lovely game of Magic, and then you're not playing a lovely game of Magic because this thing is destroying you. Yeah, this is just stupidly good for a French vanilla creature. There's no way I'm not picking this highly. There's no way I'm not playing this every single time I'm in red and it's in my pool in sealed or I see it in draft. This is just a solid B. It doesn't go any higher because it's not as impactful as something that I would give a B+ or an A to. You know, those are like ridiculous planeswalkers, Burning Sun's Avatar, etc. This is just a big, dumb, but really good creature. So definite B, definitely going to be grown testy. Thankfully, there's not too many of these cards in this set. Everything else is kind of fairly costed or has even a downside attached to it. So B for Charging Monstrosaur. Demolish is back. Demolish is 3 and a red for a sorcery at common. Destroy target artifact or land. Just like always, it's going to go straight into your sideboards, and it's probably just never going to be played. If there's a truly terrifying artifact, maybe sided in, but I just don't see anything that I'm really all that worried about. D- for Demolish. Up next is Dinosaur Stampede. Dinosaur Stampede is 2 and a red for an instant at uncommon. Attacking creatures get +2/+0 until end of turn. Dinosaurs you control gain trample until end of turn. So here's this set's variation on Trumpet Blast Plus. As usual, it's playable if you're going very wide, likely red-white or red-green, which are the dinosaur colors, of course. The Dinosaur's Claws is cute, and it makes the card even more playable if you're go-wide dinosaurs deck. You will lose to this card, I will lose to this card, but it's still just not a high pick or even an instant include. Make sure you understand your game plan and where this card works well and doesn't work well. It needs to end the game, and that's going to require a wide deck. If you're a little bit more rampy, if you're a little bit more control-y, etc., this should not be touching your main deck. All in all, it's basically a C in the decks that rather want it. It's just not something you pick highly, and it's not something you go out of your way to play unless your deck is purely built around it. Dual Shot is also back. Dual Shot is a single red mana for an instant at common. We first saw this in Shadows over Innistrad. Dual Shot deals 1 damage to each of up to 2 target creatures. So it's back, and it's still just not as good as Twin Bolt, which was this card, except you dealt 2 damage, divided as you chose amongst 1 or 2 creatures. So it was actually a shock or a ping-ping. Still, there's probably just enough X1s in the format, especially if you're up against vampire tokens, that this could be a solid sideboard plan, but I'm not sure that I'm going to actually look at actively main decking this too often. So I've got this at a D+ to start. I just don't think there's quite enough playable targets. Yes, there are a ton of 1/1s for 1. No, they're not that great. They're not a reason that I would be playing Dual Shot. So D+ for me. I'm going to leave this as a sideboard card for the time being. Fathom Fleet Firebrand is up next. Fathom Fleet Firebrand is 1 and a red for a creature human pirate at common. It's a 2/2. Pay 1 and a red. Fathom Fleet Firebrand gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So it's a bear with an upside, but the upside is very minimal. It's expensive fire breathing. I heard somebody call it something. I think it was called steam breathing because it's obviously much less good than fire breathing. Yeah, 2 mana for +1/+0 just isn't something that I'm falling over myself for. This is probably just a C at the best. We get really good bears with upsides these days, so the C+ bear with an upside default rating is kind of falling out of favor a little bit. So just a C for Fathom Fleet Firebrand. Fiery Cannonade is up next. Fiery Cannonade is 2 and a red for an instant at uncommon. Fiery Cannonade deals 2 damage to each non-pirate creature. 2 to the board doesn't seem important enough in this set for the main board. It doesn't hit the vast majority of the dinosaurs. It doesn't hit some of the larger merfolk, or even pirates, or even some of the larger vampires. I think this is basically a sideboard card against the vampire tokens deck, the really, really wide X1, X2 vampire deck. Some of the more evasive merfolk, before they get counters on them, are also within range of this, and it is really nice that it hopefully doesn't hit your creatures if you're playing a relatively piratey deck. Still, I think this lives in the sideboard. 2 damage to everything is just too little for me to main deck. It's too unimpactful for me to main deck, so I have Fiery Cannonade at a D+. Up next is Fire Shrine Keeper. Fire Shrine Keeper is a single red mana for a creature elemental at common. It's the next of the Keeper cycle, so it's a 1/1, and it has Menace. For 7 and a red, tap it and sacrifice it. It deals 3 damage to each of up to 2 target creatures. The creature is sort of okay. It's similar to the Blight Keeper. It'll get to attack, unlike the 1/1 First Striker in white, or the 0/3 that should never really attack, but it stops way sooner than a flyer stops attacking. At 8 mana, getting to possibly kill a pair of creatures, though, is a very solid play. This is probably just a little bit less playable than the black one and more playable than the white one, so I'm going to go for a C with Fire Shrine Keeper. Up next is Fire Cannon Blast. Fire Cannon Blast is 1 red for a sorcery at common. Fire Cannon Blast deals 3 damage to target creature. Raid. Fire Cannon Blast deals 6 damage to that creature instead if you attacked with a creature this turn. It's a cool variation on Aerostorm, with enough different that it needs to be totally reevaluated. Aerostorm was 3 red to deal 4 damage to creature or player, and if you raided, it was 5 damage. So not getting to hit players, but being cheaper, while being on the lower side on the non-raid half of this, but higher on the raid side of this, is still just a totally fine card. It's removal against the weaker half of the set, and post-raid, it kills a whole ton of the set. Being sorcery speed hurts it a bit and keeps this around the B- level, though. It's not really first pickable, but it is still a pretty high pick, and you'll always play it. Up next is Frenzied Raptor. Frenzied Raptor is 2 and a red for a creature dinosaur at common. It's a 4/2 with no rules text. This is the red vanilla dinosaur. 4/2 for 3 is better than a 3/2 for 3, and I'm generally pretty okay with 3/2s for 3, so I guess this is fine as a playable. It's around kind of the C level. Without any form of evasion, though, you're just not dying to play this unless you need a creature or specifically a dinosaur. You will cut it if you have better cards, and you will not cut it if you're desperate for a creature. So, middle of the road, C. Up next is Headstrong Brute. Headstrong Brute is 2 and a red for a creature orc pirate at common. It's a 3/3. Headstrong Brute can't block. Headstrong Brute has Menace as long as you control another pirate. A nice aggressive creature, but you're going to need to make sure that you are definitely the beat down always. Not being able to block is a real drawback, but if you're aggro pirates, then getting Menace will really help keep you going. All in all, it's just a solid C, but you do cut it if you are not the super aggro deck. Basically, if you wouldn't have played Bone Slashing Marauder in Hour of Devastation, you wouldn't be playing Headstrong Brute. Up next is another reprint, Hijack. Hijack is 1 red for a sorcery at common. Gain control of target artifact or creature until end of turn. Untap it. It gains haste until end of turn. I wasn't really a fan of hijacking Kaladesh, and the vehicles in here, as we'll see in a few days, are far worse, so I'm still not a fan of Hijack. I don't tend to play these cards anyways, so I'm going to go with a C-. If you're a big fan of threat and effects, you'll of course like this more. I'm just really not a fan of them because they're so high variance. They either win the game or they do just nothing, and that's not how I tend to play Limited. So C- for Hijack. Up next is a card that I definitely use in Limited. Lightning Strike is finally back. We're not getting Lightning Bolt ever again, but we can get Lightning Strike again. 1 and a red for an instant at uncommon. Used to be common way back when. Lightning Strike deals 3 damage to target creature or player. If you're new to Magic, then maybe you haven't played with 2 mana instant speed 3 damage spells to a creature or player before. They are good. They are really good. You know how good Open Fire was? This is just way, way, way better. This, along with so much else in this set, the mana sinks, the decent counter spells, the high cost cards, etc., makes me just so excited for this limited format, as I've said, and I'll continue to say a million times over. This is just a solid first pick. It's just great removal, even if it maybe takes a combat step to kill something bigger with it. Lightning Strike is fantastic. It is a solid A-. I will first pick it just after bombs or some sort of utterly unconditional and still cheap removal, which there isn't much of. Lightning Rig Crew is up next. Lightning Rig Crew is 2 and a red for a creature Goblin Pirate at uncommon. It's an 0/5. Tap, Lightning Rig Crew deals 1 damage to each opponent. Whenever you cast a pirate spell, untap Lightning Crew. We've seen something like this before with Lobber Crew and with Thermo Alchemist, and this is the latest in that trend. Those two that I just mentioned, as well as Nettle Thrower, that's not right at all, Nettle Drone from Battle for Zendikar, those untapped a lot more because they were untapping with basically every card you were playing in the formats that they were in their ideal decks. In this one, you're just not going to be playing a pirate every single turn. Even if every creature in your deck is a pirate, you're still not going to be playing a pirate every single turn. So this is going to be a once-in-a-turn pinger, but it's an 0/5, which blocks really, really well, so it will still do some work, and I'll still be happy with it. And as long as I'm playing at least 8 or more pirates, this is going to be a double pinger every turn, and it's going to be a very real clock for the opponent. I'm a big fan of this card. I'm a big fan of these types of cards, even if this is a little bit weaker than the previous ones that we've seen. So I'm at kind of a B on this. If you are really low on pirates, it's more of a C+, because it's just a once-a-turn pinger. But if you can get this twice a turn, as I said, you know, ideally 8 or more pirates, meaning that you'll get this hopefully 4 or 5 times as a double ping, then it's going to be just that much better. So C+ in an average deck, B if you are piratey. Up next is Makeshift Munitions. Makeshift Munitions is 1 and a red for an enchantment at rare. Pay a single mana, generic, any color, sacrifice an artifact or creature. Makeshift Munitions deals 1 damage to target creature or player. 2 mana is decently cheap for this, but I'm just not seeing too many great uses for it. Obviously very useful with Captivating Crew, but at that point you're looking at 5 mana to steal and kill, plus having to have these 2 specific cards, 1 rare and 1 uncommon, combo online, is not easy to do, but it will do some serious work if you do get lucky and get it turned on. As well, of course, you can put in Hijack, as we just saw. Basically, if you're not abusing this card, you should not be playing it at all, and I put it at like a D+. If you can abuse it, it's definitely higher, but you got to get the combo online. So D+ for Makeshift Munitions. Up next is Nest Robber. It looks like a parrot, but it's a dinosaur. Nest Robber is 1 and a red for a creature dinosaur at common. It's a 2/1 with haste. So it's a generic goblin piker with an upside. Something really needs to be done to a 2/1 for 2 to raise it from the C- that it usually is. And this did it. Haste makes it better. Play this little dino whenever you have a spot. It's a solid C. If you've got better stuff, cut it. And if you don't, play it. Up next is Otepic. I'll have to find the pronunciation of that. Otepic Huntmaster. Otepic Huntmaster is 1 and a red for a creature human shaman at uncommon. It's a 1/2. Dinosaur spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Tap, target dinosaur gains haste until end of turn. This could be fairly solid, but you need to be loaded up with dinosaurs. We last saw something similar to this with Dragon Speaker Shaman, and it was nigh on unplayable, but there also just weren't that many dragons that you were reliably going to get in that format. In this format, you should be able to get a bunch of dinosaurs, if not the 7 or 8 that you probably need to make this truly playable. The Haste Edition, though, makes it a really nice sort of add-on to it, as the really big dinosaurs become terrifying if they get to attack the turn they come out. That's why I think Charging Monstrosaur is so terrifying. Ultimately, I'm looking at this card as a card that you take once you're already going down the dinosaur route, just because I think the dinosaur deck probably needs a reason to build around it from the rare sheet or maybe the uncommons, and then picking this up helps the deck out rather than this being the reason that you build around it. So I'm at kind of a C+ if you're dinosaurs and a C- if you've only got a few. Up next is Rampaging Ferocidon. Rampaging Ferocidon is 2 and a red for a creature dinosaur at rare. It's a 3/3 with menace. Players can't gain life. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, Rampaging Ferocidon deals 1 damage to that creature's controller. I don't know. This is fine. It's a 3/3 menace for 3, which is great. Don't get me wrong. The life gain part of this is basically meaningless in the vast majority of matches, unless you're against the vampire player, in which case, I don't know. We'll have to see if it's backbreaking or if it's just kind of a little bit annoying. Pinging every player who plays a creature is also a little bit too symmetrical for my taste. Basically, you need to be absolutely certain that you are going to be the aggressor, that you're going to be hitting your opponent harder and faster than they can hit you. If you can't guarantee that, then you're handicapping yourself far too much. This feels like it's probably a bit more constructed intended, I guess, for a really tight classic red burn build. I'll keep an eye on this. I'll see how the red heavy decks play out, but I'm going to start this at kind of like a weak B-, but a B- that I'm kind of afraid of playing. So it's almost more like a C+ to me. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how regularly you're paired up with the Vampires deck, or if that matters. But yeah, let's start it at a B-. Up next is Raptor Hatchling. Raptor Hatchling is 1 and a red for a little tiny creature dinosaur at uncommon. It's a 1/1. It's got Enrage. Whenever Raptor Hatchling is dealt damage, create a 3/3 green dinosaur creature token with Trample. Now, of course, whenever Raptor Hatchling is dealt damage, it's probably going to die anyways. And then that 3/3 comes down to replace it, which is totally fine. We played Doomed Dissenter in Amonkhet sometimes. We weren't super happy with it usually. I probably played it a little bit more than I should have even. And that just made a 2/2 for, you know, basically everything else that's on this card. Making a 3/3 trample is definitely a step up. I don't expect it to be viable to pull off, but pumping this thing's toughness and getting it damaged repeatedly to make 3/3s sounds gross, but also not terribly realistic. Still not a super high pick, but very playable at a C+. Up next is Repeating Barrage. Repeating Barrage is 1 red for a sorcery at rare. Repeating Barrage deals 3 damage to target creature or player. Raid, pay 3 red, return Repeating Barrage from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only if you attacked with a creature this turn. This seems pretty solid, although maybe a little bit much for a rare. This probably could have been an uncommon, but oh well. 1 red for sorcery speed. Lightning Strike isn't great, but we'll play it, and we'll still play it pretty highly. Getting to buy it back, though, is a really nice idea, and can be the reach that you need to finish off the game, since it can hit players. Still, I think it will feel win-mori at times, because if you're attacking reliably to be able to return this, then do you really need this coming back to win? It'll help, and it'll get that win early, but the question is, do you need it? But all of that whole theoretical situation is tacked on for free to a 3-mana, 3 damage burn spell. So it's just gravy on top of it, even if it is maybe sometimes going to be a little bit win more. It's nice to have that option. And again, a mana sink, a way to spend your excess mana. All in all, I think this is solid, even if it sometimes might be overkill. Just slightly shy of first pick, I think, due to the sorcery speed, unless the pack's really bad, which it could be. If this is the rare, then we're going to be looking at the uncommons to maybe be better than this, and there's, you know, not too many. So I'm going to go with a B+ on Repeating Barrage. Up next is Rigging Runner. Rigging Runner is a single red mana for a creature goblin pirate at rare. It's a 1/1 with first strike. It's got Raid. Rigging Runner enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it if you attacked with a creature this turn. I really am not sure about this. It seems fine, though unimpactful. Again, we already talked about 1/1 first strikers for 1. I don't super care about them. Yes, they kill the 3/1s that I love, but they're just not that big of a deal. So I basically need to guarantee that this is going to become a 2/2. Unfortunately, it might take some time to guarantee that you're going to get a raid trigger. You know, we're looking at least turn 2, turn 3, turn 4. And at that point, a 2/2 becomes a little bit meaningless, but the first strike does help it keep a little bit of impact. I don't know. Playing this without the raid trigger is just something I do not want to do, and playing it with the raid trigger is something that's nice, but it needs to come down real early. I'll keep an eye on this guy because I feel like I'm going to be starting out a bit low on it, but I am going to start it at a C. I won't be actively looking to play it, but I'll give it a go if I've got a spot. Up next is Ryle. Ryle is a single red mana for a sorcery at common. Ryle deals 1 damage to target creature you control. That creature gains trample until end of turn. draw a card. So this is weird, but obviously it's meant to enable Enrage. You damage a creature yourself, get your Enrage trigger, it gains trample, maybe that's important, and it replaces itself. Ultimately, I kind of find all of that just way too cute, especially at sorcery speed. Trample's far better when you can surprise your opponent after they chump blocked. Drawing a card is good, but not a reason to play a card. You weren't really playing Crash Through, were you? Really, I think this is a card that you just don't play. I think it's like a D. But if you have a ridiculous Enrage trigger, I'm looking at you, Bellowing Aegisaur, then this can get kind of disgusting. All in all, though, I think you need those very specific reasons to play this card. Otherwise, you don't touch it. So D for Ryle. Up next is Rowdy Crew. Rowdy Crew is 2 red for a creature human pirate at Mythic. It's a 3/3 with trample. When Rowdy Crew enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards. Then discard 2 cards at random. If 2 cards that share a card type are discarded this way, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Rowdy Crew. This is the Hearthstone style of random cards that I do not like to play. I do not want to play a 3/3 for 4 that maybe sometimes will be 5/5. Maybe. Luckily, the fail state is fine. It's a 3/3 trample for 4 that nets you a card. You don't get to choose the card, unfortunately, but it nets you a card. And that's not the worst thing ever. If it becomes a 5/5, cool. That's just a solid bonus that happened. And if you get a good card out of it, that's a cool solid bonus too. But there's just so much going on here that's going to, you know that you're going to draw 2 lands and the best creature in your deck, and you're going to randomly throw away a land and that best creature, and you're left with a 3/3 trample for all of that. I don't know. I don't like random lists like this, so I'm not going to go out of my way to play this card. It seems fine, like a C+ level. It's certainly not a first pick card. I'm just not super interested in going deep on this card. It's just way too Hearthstone-y for me. So C+ for Rowdy Crew. Up next is an old favorite, Rummaging Goblin. If you ever wondered where the term rummaging came from, it came from this little guy. Rummaging Goblin is 2 and a red for a creature goblin rogue at common. It's a 1/1. Tap and discard a card, and you get to draw a card for paying that. I've missed this little guy. He's from M13 and M15 originally. And yeah, it's a 1/1 for 3, which is not great, but the rummaging effect is so good, you just can't ignore it. The card value that you can get out of this is crazy. It's not a bomb. It's not even a high pick, but you should basically always play this. Solid C+. I'll play every copy of this. I'm really glad to see Rummaging Goblin back. Up next is our other red mythic, and it's also something. Star of Extinction. Star of Extinction is 5 red for a sorcery at Mythic. Destroy target land. Okay. Star of Extinction deals 20 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. Love the flavor. Absolutely love it. 7 mana is an awful lot for a Wrath, though. Just far too rich for my blood. This is just going to come down so late in the game that you can't, the ideal for a Wrath is 4 or 5 mana, because then you keep some creatures back. Maybe you play 1. You kind of bait your opponent into playing some extra creatures. You take some damage that you would prefer not to, but you have to, and then surprise you Wrath, and then you play your creatures. You can't do that when your Wrath comes down on turn 7. You can't just take 7 turns worth of damage. You're going to have to actually play Magic, establish your board, and then lose your board. So I'm not really a fan of Star of Extinction. I'm going to put this at a D+. I do classically underrate Wraths, so I'll keep an eye on it. But this one just feels too expensive for me. And the Destroy a Land clause is just meaningless. So D+ for Star of Extinction. Up next is Stormfleet Arsonist. Stormfleet Arsonist is 4 and a red for a creature orc pirate at uncommon. It's a 4/4. It has raid. When Stormfleet Arsonist enters the battlefield, if you attack with a creature this turn, target opponent sacrifices a permanent. This seems fine. It sounds probably way better than it actually is, though. This is coming down likely on turn 5 or later, so it basically says your opponent sacrifices a land, probably, or the most meaningless creature you've ever seen in your life. You're just not likely to get anything slightly relevant with a turn 5 or later edict effect. So really, it's a 4/4 for 5. So I'm going to put this at a C+. It's ever so slightly better because maybe you do happen to get them in a situation where they sack their best creature. But again, this is one of the rare sack a permanent cards, not sack a non-land permanent card. So they will not sack their bomb if they can just sack a land. So I'm going to put this at a C+, and I think C+, honestly, is the kind of the maximum for this card. It sounds way better than it is, and that's because we're so used to sacrifice a non-land permanent. Up next is Stormfleet Pyromancer. Stormfleet Pyromancer is 4 and a red for a creature human pirate wizard at common. It's a 3/2, and it's got raid. When Stormfleet Pyromancer enters the battlefield, if you attack with a creature this turn, Stormfleet Pyromancer deals 2 damage to target creature or player. So basically, we're getting a 3/2 plus a shock, which would be 4 mana, traditionally, not 5 mana. So I'm not super sold on this being a super valuable card. It'll definitely do some work, that's for sure, but I don't know, it just feels really overcosted, which is actually kind of how I like my formats to be. I don't like my commons with upsides like this that are killing creatures to be ludicrously cheap. Still, it's probably going to play totally fine. This is a slower format, so I think anyways. So 5 mana is probably not asking the world of this. And it all costs 1 card instead of costing 2 cards, which I guess is better than a vanilla 3/2 plus shock. So ultimately, this just seems like a card that I will probably play as a C, I think. I will cut it when I have better stuff, and I will play it when I don't and need a creature or a pirate or a wizard for some reason. So yeah, let's just give it a solid C for Stormfleet Pyromancer. Up next is Sun-Crowned Hunters. Sun-Crowned Hunters is 4 red for a creature dinosaur at common. It's a 5/4. It has Enrage. Whenever Sun-Crowned Hunters is dealt damage, it deals 3 damage to target opponent. So if these things get touched, they bolt your opponent's face. This sounds a little bit close to Afflict for me to feel comfortable. I'm very happy that Afflict is going away, except this also works on blocking too, so it's even better. At 6 mana though, this likely doesn't go into every single deck. It does feel very powerful and playable though, but I think the format's going to have to kind of shake out to see where this falls. I'm going to start it at a B-. The power is very, very definitely there, but we'll see how it shakes out. I feel like it's probably going to be less good than it actually is, just because that casting cost is slightly prohibitive. So let's start at a B- and see where we go from there. Up next is Sunbird's Invocation. Sunbird's Invocation is 5 and a red for an enchantment at rare. Whenever you cast a spell from your hand, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. You may cast a card revealed this way with converted mana cost X or less without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Way too cute. This is a newer player trap because it's one of those cards where it feels like you're cheating at Magic. But 6 mana for an enchantment that does nothing until my next play, and even then may not do anything or may do something really unimpactful. Just way too much of a waste of my time. It's a waste of a card. It's a waste of a turn. It's a waste of 6 mana. I've got this at a D. Maybe it can do some work. Maybe there's some weird way to build around it, but it's not for me to figure out. It just looks like a bad card, so straight D. Up next is yet another reprint. Red's got a lot of them. Sure Strike. We saw Sure Strike recently. Sure Strike is 1 and a red for an instant at common. Target creature gets +3/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn. That combination of ability and power basically means you win combat every single time you play this. Totally fine combat trick that will almost always get you that combat win, but it's still just a combat trick, which requires a specific scenario to be happening, and so you just can't be too high on it. Just to see that I play when I have a slot and I cut aggressively when I don't. Up next is Swashbuckling. Swashbuckling is 1 and a red for an enchantment aura at common. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has haste. This, of course, is a straight functional reprint of Goblin Warpaint. Goblin Warpaint is identical to this, but it doesn't mention pirates, and this does have something piratey going on, so why not? Goblin Warpaint's never really been good. I've never cared for it. The haste just usually isn't relevant until, of course, the rare time that it is, and the +2/+2 is just not worth a card. The blue one of this pseudo cycle is still king, and this is just right in the heavily cuttable area and probably just the unplayable area. So I'm going to go with a D+ for Goblin Warpaint 2.0. Up next is Thrash of Raptors. Thrash of Raptors is 3 and a red for a creature dinosaur at common. It's a 3/3. As long as you control another dinosaur, Thrash of Raptors gets +2/+0 and has trample. So it's a hill giant that, if you've got enough dinos, can be a 5/3 trample for 4. A 5/3 for 4 is not terribly playable, kind of a C-. We've seen them before a lot in the past few years, though they have always had the must attack clause. It sounds great because it's 5 power. But it's also 3 toughness, so it dies to basically everything up to and including a lightning strike. It is better than a 3/3 for 4, though, and the trample does certainly help, because at least it can get chump blocked by, you know, a 2-drop or a 3-drop in the set and still get some damage through. So I'm guessing this is just going to be a solid C. It's better than the C- that I would usually give a hill giant, but it's not much better than that. So C, and that's assuming that you're playing a bunch of dinosaurs. Up next is Tillinolly's Knight. Tillinolly's Knight is 1 and a red for a creature human knight at common. It's a 2/2, and whenever Tillinolly's Knight attacks, if you control a dinosaur, Tillinolly's Knight gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So it's a bear with an upside. It's a 2/2 for 2, and if you've got a dinosaur and it attacks as a 3/3 for 2, which is pretty okay. This is a bear with an upside that I will give a C+2, because attacking as a 3/3 is a pretty good upside. Still absolutely nothing higher than a C+. You're going to be happy to play these when you have them, assuming you have enough dinosaurs. If you don't, it drops way lower to like a C-. If you have no dinosaurs, it's probably just unplayable in this format. But, you know, it's just fine. C+, you're going to pick this mid-pack at the earliest. Up next is Tillinolly's Skin Shifter. Tillinolly's Skin Shifter is 2 and a red for a creature human shaman at rare. It's an 0/1 with haste. Whenever Tillinolly's Skin Shifter attacks, it becomes a copy of another target non-legendary attacking creature until end of turn. This has a very low floor, unfortunately. It's an 0/1 for 3, and that's not something I'm ever going to play in my Magic career. Being a copy of your best attacking creature, though, is quite nice. Ultimately, this feels like it's going to be very swingy for me, but likely isn't too much of a cost on your deck to include. The floor of it is the worst case scenario for sure, and even the medium case scenario gets pretty decent. You definitely want to be aggressive, you definitely want to be creature heavy. If you're not either of those things, you probably don't play this card, but if you are, you're probably going to be decently happy as long as this has a friend to copy. So I'm going to start it at a B, but I think it'll feel horrible to play against sometimes and horrible to play sometimes. So B for Tillinolly's Skin Shifter. I'm not looking at first picking this. I'm looking at a few picks into the pack before I take it. Up next is Trove of Temptation. Trove of Temptation is 3 and a red for an enchantment at uncommon. Each opponent must attack you or a planeswalker you control with at least 1 creature each combat, if able. At the beginning of your end step, create a colorless treasure artifact token. Yeah, no. I'm not brave enough to assume that I'm just totally okay with my opponent attacking me every single turn just to get a treasure. Not my cup of tea when I'm already down on enchantments that don't really do too much, though at least this one does do something the turn that you play it. Still, I'm at an F on this. This just is not a card that I'm willing to play. Just no. Maybe it ends up being a cornerstone of a Revel in Riches deck where you build up a giant amount of walls until you can get attacked every turn, but no, this ain't me. F. Up next is Unfriendly Fire. Unfriendly Fire is 4 and a red for an instant at common. Unfriendly Fire deals 4 damage to target creature or player. How much mana will we pay for burn? Well, probably 5 and maybe even more. This is still totally respectable piece of removal, and hitting face for 4 as well is very nice, and all at instant speed. Costing 5 probably puts this out of the instantly first pickable range, but it is still going to kill a lot of things and maybe even opponent. Still solid B for me, but boy are we a long way from Lightning Bolt, and this even compares pretty unfavorably to a pair of Lightning Strikes in the same set. So I'll give this a B-. I don't think you ever really first pick this, but I think you do play it every single time you have it. You probably grumble about it a little bit, but that's the world we live in these days. Up next is our flip card for red. It's Vance's Blasting Cannons. Vance's Blasting Cannons is 3 and a red for a legendary enchantment at rare. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast the card that's this turn. Whenever you cast your 3rd spell in a turn, you may transform Vance's Blasting Cannons. I have not realized that most of these are May abilities. The white one is not a May ability. You must transform it when you attack with 3 creatures. The black and blue ones, though, are May abilities, which makes them probably a little bit better because you don't have to flip them. You can keep the generally much better enchantment side of the blue and black ones. But should you cast 3 spells in a turn, and should you decide to transform Vance's blasting cannons, they become Spitfire Bastion. Spitfire Bastion is a legendary land that you can tap to add red to your mana pool. You can also pay 2 in a red and tap it to deal 3 damage to target creature or player. 3 mana to bolt something. Technically 4, since you're tapping this new land that you just found. This, for me, is the realm of constructed. When's the last time you cast 3 spells in a turn in Limited? I'm not sure I remember the last time I did it. It's just not going to happen reliably enough. So this card isn't flipping, which if it does is a totally fine mana sink. Just dealing 3 damage a turn is going to kill opponents pretty quickly. So it's ultimately just drawing you an extra card each turn, which is cool. But you'd better be able to have a way to cast it because it is going away at the end of turn, which is always... I'm always hesitant about all of these red spells with this sort of pseudo card draw or temporary card draw. Unfortunately, this does turn off all your instant speed tricks and such. If you're blue-red and you top deck a counterspell, well, that sucks. If you top deck a combat trick, well, your opponent knows it's coming, so I don't know. Not a super big fan of it. Ultimately, this card just feels way too bad for Limited. The front side doesn't feel good enough for me. The flip condition feels nigh on impossible. The back side's nice, but you're just not going to get it to it regularly enough. So I'll leave it to constructed players. I've got it at just a solid F. Our final card for red is Wily Goblin. Wily Goblin is red for a creature goblin pirate at uncommon. It's a 1/1. When Wily Goblin enters the battlefield, create a colorless treasure artifact token. I am not a fan of this card. It's a 2-mana 1/1. I've talked about how I'm not a fan of 1-mana 1/1s. 2-mana 1/1s are really getting far away from what I want to play. It's a difficult to cast 2-mana 1/1 because you must have 2 red. And all it does is give you a treasure? Yeah, no. If I was going real deep in Revel in Riches, maybe this is just another way for me to get my hands on a treasure. But if my plan is to use treasures to ramp, this is just not going to pull it off. I'm going to give this an F+. I think this is just an awful card, and you should not ever play it. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for red. Red has some really cool looking cards. Burning Sun's Avatar needs to be in every single pack that I open, just like Dire Fleet Ravager, I want to say that card was called. We get Lightning Strike back. We've got a whole bunch of burn, a lot of reprints, just a bunch of cool cards here. So I'm super excited about red as well, just like basically every color in this format. Let me know what cards you're looking forward to playing, what you think of red, what you agree with, what you disagree with. Chat with me in the comments down below. Chat with each other in the comments down below. That's what they're there for. That's what these set reviews are designed to encourage. If you do have questions, comments, or suggestions, you can always find me on Twitter at the Mana Leek. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. You can also find me at facebook.com/themanaleak, twitch.tv/themanaleak, and patreon.com/themanaleak. If you want to become a backer there, sponsor a draft, get access to the notes for my set reviews. Patreon backers do get access to that, as well as work your way towards earning a Mana Leak playmat that I will send you. Check that out at patreon.com/themanaleak. If you enjoy the content, make sure you click that thumbs up button. It doesn't just make me feel good, it does actually get my videos on the homepage and out to people who don't know who I am, etc. So that really does help out by clicking thumbs up. If you're new, hi, welcome. Click subscribe if you haven't already and you want to see more. It'll keep you up to date when the next set review goes up, when the Ixalan live draft recap goes up, when the box opening goes up, when the crack-a-packs start, when my top 10 lists start, all the other regular weekly content. If you want to make sure that you see when that comes up, click subscribe. But if you do have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, see y'all tomorrow for the green set review.